Hey, listen, I hope you enjoy this episode of the Antisocial Podcast. I understand you're probably wondering whose voice this is. So, hello, my name's JB, and I love to write big, heavy riffs with big power metal choruses, and I call it Fierce Deity, which, after you're done here, I invite you to check out. Which you can do by finding me all over social media at Fierce Deity Band, or simply head to fiercedeityband.com. Anyway, enjoy the show.
Hey folks, welcome to the Antisocial Podcast. Before we kick into this week's episode, come over and join me on Patreon. That's right, patreon.com/Andy Dowling is the place to go if you want to support this podcast. Support starts from only $1 a month, dirt cheap, and there's additional tiers there where you can get exclusive podcast episodes and much, much more. Patreon.com/Andy Dowling. Come over and help me out. Yeah. Hey, episode 231 of the Antisocial Podcast is here, and this week's guest is Tait Christian, aka Fang von Rathenstein, from the band Lords of the Trident from Madison, Wisconsin. One of the most over-the-top, ridiculous, awesome, amazing bands that I've known about. Just an incredible band, playing some great power metal straight out of the US, and one of the hardest working bands that I've known about it as well. Tait is just an incredible guy and just leads his band in this DIY space, which we talk about a lot in this episode. Go and check out lordsofthetrident.com, of course, and a fantastic website with all their social media handles, blah, blah, blah. And in particular, go and check out their Patreon page as well. I'm pretty sure it's patreon.com/Lords of the Trident. Otherwise, you can just search for Lords of the Trident. I'll have the links in the show notes over at andysocial.net or andydowling.net, of course. But yeah, great chat. We talk about Patreon. We talk about DIY stuff. We nerd out on a whole bunch of different things. Great guy to talk to. Definitely have him on the podcast again. And hopefully we get to meet up again. First time I met him was in 2016 at Prog Power USA in Atlanta, Georgia. And it's been a few years since, so hopefully we'll meet up again sometime down the track. But here we are. Please enjoy this great chat with Tait Christian, a.k.a. Fang von Rathenstein.
Yeah, it's very difficult for me to stop doing things. You know, there was a time, it was about maybe about a year and a half ago, where I got a little like overloaded, overwhelmed. I think, you know, it was shortly after, it was about a year after Shadows from the Past came out, and there was just all this bad mojo just all happened all at the same time, and it was like really sort of depressing me at the time, and I needed to get away. And so my wife and I planned this trip to Florida to we got an Airbnb at this condo that I used to go to every year. My grandparents had this timeshare at this condo association, and I hadn't been there since I was 16 years old. You know, and I was 34 at the time, so it'd been so many years, but I had so many amazing memories of this place. And I remember going there, and like our main goal was to, like, you know, not do anything, to, you know, no laptops. We're going to keep our phones in the condo. We're just going to like go sit on the beach for like, you know, a week and a half. And like, it was really hard. It was like, the first 3 or 4 days were like stressful in the fact that I just wanted to, you know, like do something. I was always planning something in my head, like, oh, we should go see some gators, or, oh, we should go see if there's a go-kart track or something. And yeah, it was, so I don't know. I think that's kind of how my brain functions. It's just really hard for me to turn that stuff off. I think I'm, you know, happier when I'm busy, or at least I've gotten to the point where, you know, I do so much now that I feel like I should be doing it, you know, or I feel like I'm maybe partially that I need to do it just to kind of keep the engine moving forward. You know what I mean? It's
almost like you've got a sense of calm when you're busy. Like when everything's, when there's chaos, it's controlled chaos. You've got this this sort of centering feeling when you're in the midst of it all.
Right. And I think that's where a lot of a lot of people say I'm heavily DIY, and I 100% agree with that. And I think that's where a lot of that, sort of comes from. It's partially the fact that, I'd love to learn how to do X, Y, or Z or whatever we're doing at the moment. But I think also it's partially that, like, it's fun to kind of keep busy in that way, and to learn how to do that, and to sort of be able to control that aspect of the production of the creation, if you will. All of that sort of thing surrounding the whole DIY ethos is really kind of centering for me. So yeah, I'd agree with that.
Is it a case where you're always, I'm just trying to think of the right word, but like excited just to learn something new, like a little trick or some way to improve what you're already doing? Like you're always just trying to search for something? Or is it just a case that you're just coming up with just ideas, and through those ideas you just stumble into, oh, okay, I know how to do that better next time, or improve, or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I think it's, I think for me, I have, when I have an idea for something, like I will always see the final result in my head, and it will be like fully fleshed out, and it'll look perfect, and it'll, like for instance, if I'm making if I have an idea for a music video, I'm like, okay, the camera's going to look like this, and it's going to be lit kind of like this, and there's going to be these big sweeping motions, and we need fireworks, we need explosions in the background. Let's see, and so I have this kind of idea of what I want the final product to look like, and I'm pretty specific with it, of like, okay, what I want this shot, that shot to look like. I always have these flashes of like, exact idea, and then it turns into this thing of like, well, how do I do that? Because I've got this like old Canon camera, like with this kind of crappy lens that I bought for $50. Like, okay, what do I need to like make it look a little bit more cinematic? And then I dive into the rabbit hole of like lighting, and then I dive in the rabbit hole of color correction, and then I dive into the rabbit hole of like CGI and stuff like that. So I think it's less of like, me sitting down at the computer going, oh, today I'm going to teach myself CGI because this might come in handy in the future. And it's more like, no, I really want to build a giant spaceship with a rotating saw blade on the front for this music video. And I don't know how to do that. And I just need to figure out how to do that, So, and then it eventually turns into this whole amalgamation of like, I know how to do all these things, well enough to a degree where people are now like, hey man, would you record my band and mix my album and do my music video? I'm like, no.
Not yet. Anyway.
I mean, I could. So.
I mean, that's the big difference between, what you're doing and what people can see you're doing versus a lot of other people out there that have all these amazing ideas. So I think coming up with ideas is sort of, it's a very natural thing that most people do. I think, if you sit someone down and, depending on whether they've got alcohol in them or not, just thinking about my own experiences, like you can come up with a whole range of like weird and wonderful different things that you could potentially do. But then there's that gap. There's that gap in between like the idea and actually executing it. It's like that follow through. It's the action, and for me, like this has always been a big challenge for me. I'll have like that sort of idea in my head of something, but then there's such a massive gap in between of knowledge and skill, and then you tend to sort of go, oh, I don't know, man, this is pretty daunting, and then so you start with every good intention, and then it starts to fade away. So even just hearing you sort of go, okay, I need to learn how to do this, I need to learn how to do that, that's something that I think is missing from a lot of other people, because it's just it's a really tough thing to do. Just sit down and patiently start to build that skill set, learn bits and pieces along the way.
Yeah. Well, and I have a friend in a band, that shall not be named, and I love their band, and it's the exact same thing. You'll sit down, you have a couple beers with him, and he will come up with these amazing ideas, and you're like, yes, oh my God, yes, and then you come back to him like 3 years later, and you're like, what happened to the giant robot suit, dude? And he's like, oh yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned like patiently building these things, because actually I would call it like impatiently building these. That's one of the things that my wife like both loves and hates about me, is that when I get one of these ideas, when I'm like, okay, we're gonna build a beer barrel sauna in the backyard. I get up and I start it right that second, and I just and I don't stop. There was a time, it was right before this whole thing, the whole COVID-19 thing hit, that we had just gotten back from a little mini tour, and there was a stretch of drive where people were. I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but there was a moment where everybody was kind of like, we don't have a whole lot to do. This is kind of boring. All of our devices are out of juice and blah 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 blah. And we were just kind of in that hate. I think a few people were sick, and we were talking about we were sort of discussing the plot of some old Super Nintendo games, and I'm like, oh, you guys gotta play this. It's so good. Blah blah. And nobody else had played it. And then when I got home, I got in my mind of like, they make those little TVs that go on the back of headrests, like in a car. I wonder how hard it would be to like hook up, because I know like a friend of mine had hooked up a Nintendo 64 into his like built-in video system in his minivan. Wow. I wonder how hard it would be to do that. And then 2 days later, I had a functional like Raspberry Pi with 50,000 arcade games on it that was hooked up to the car via USB-C, and it would all start up automatically. And there was a Bluetooth controller, a set of Bluetooth controllers, and then I had spliced it over to a second monitor. It's just like when I get these ideas, it's like I have to act on them, and then they just manifest themselves into reality. So it's less of a patiently building up my skill set, and it's more of like a impatient. I'm the Veruca Salt of DIY. Don't care how, I want it now.
I'm just visualizing that very small window of time between coming home and actually getting it all done, where you pretty much just immersed yourself in this obsessive way where you just haven't stopped. You haven't come up for air at all. Just with this goal in places, and it becomes not just this nice to have, oh, that'd be kind of cool. It's now like it has to happen. And, it could be almost the stakes are raised where this is do or die now. Like, if I don't get this done, I won't be able to sleep. I won't be able to eat. I won't be able to function. I won't be able to live. I need to get done. Does it sort of get to that moment where it's that manic sort of just obsessive sort of thing where you just need to execute it, need to finish it?
It does. It doesn't get that bad. I do forget to eat sometimes, where it's just and there have been lunches that I've missed, and I looked up at my watch and it's like, oh geez, it's 3 p.m. Oh my God, how did I miss lunch? And then I realized, oh wait, I am hungry. Oh crap, yeah, you're right. But yeah, you get in the zone and you're doing stuff, you're learning stuff, and I think especially when I love technology. I love music business, and I love just a lot of like the more technical side of music, in terms of not in terms of like ground that has already been tread. Like I'm not super obsessed with like, oh, how this compressor releases comparatively to like this other like U45 compressor. I'm not in like in a gearhead way, but I'm sort of more like in a experimental kind of like, I wonder if you could hook up an in-ear monitoring system into a computer to live stream over YouTube. I wonder if you could do that. And then you get lost for 2 days, like figuring that out. So I don't know. It's that kind of thing. So yeah, sometimes I do get a little obsessive. And I think, back to circle back to my other story, when we were getting away for a little while to go to Florida and just relax. I think there's a there's a side effect from. And I kind of see it now, right? You had sort of said earlier when we were talking that I take a lot of the brunt of the work, for better or for worse, of the band, and that's of my own doing, and I'm perfectly happy doing it. But when you make something and you're working on it for so long, and it doesn't turn out it doesn't have quite the impact in the way that you expected it to. I think that for a lot of creative people, that can be really sort of draining. And I think at that point, I'd run into a situation where I had a bunch of these finished things that I, did all myself, was super, very, very proud of, and I was expecting people to look at it and go like, "Whoa," and the reaction that I got from a lot, just the general internet, you could say, right? It was sort of like all right, sweet, it wasn't like a whoa, it was like a yeah, all right, cool, dude, kind of a thing. So I like a tangible example for the last album, right, that we did, Shadows from the Past. We we recorded it all ourselves, and I made 8 music videos for it, and it's a 10 album, or it's a 10 song album. So I did 8 music videos over the course of a year, and one was coming out just about every month and a half, sometimes every month, when we were really pushing the album. And I, of course, I didn't want to do just like a band playing on stage sort of music video, so every single one had to be different and unique. So the first one I came up with, and I actually coded this myself, I came up with a new and novel way to film somebody's face and have the computer programmatically turn the face or the words or whatever you were filming, a drummer or whatever, into fire in a new sort of like programmatic way that nobody had ever done before. And I was all excited about this. I'm like, oh my God. And Brittany Slays from Alicia Archers was guest vocal on this track. And I'm like, oh my God, people are going to flip their lid about this thing, and it was sort of like, and then the next one, I taught like I said, I taught myself CGI because I had to put a buzzsaw on the front of a spaceship, and and the whole thing we did all in CGI, and there was like holograms involved, and that was new. And then the next one after that was in VR, so it was fully shot in 360, and you could put on a VR headset and be like in the music video. Or you could pull it up on your phone and move your phone around, and so we're doing all of these things that were so, from a PR perspective, I'm like, oh my God, all of these are home runs, because it's not like band releases music video. It's lead singer finds a way to programmatically turn anything into fire. Lead singer makes 360 music video that for use in with HTC Vive. I mean, there was all these easily things that you could just turn into PR wins, and just all of them just seemed to go at the time, just kind of seemed to go nowhere. And the thing that really broke my brain was, we'd done all these music videos, and I'd gone on the vacation, and I sort of chilled out, and we came back, and we had a friend of ours, so a friend of our drummers, called us up, and he's like, "Hey man, I run a small YouTube like reaction channel," and he mostly did like women react to X, Y, or Z. So it was like women react to extreme metal, or women react to X-rated music videos, or it was all like music related. And somebody on the chat said, in the women react to metal, said, "Oh, you should do metal bands react to pop." And he's like, "Huh, I know a metal band." So he called us up, and I thought, I didn't think anything was going to come of this. It was just sort of like, yeah, I'll go and have a few beers and talk shit about a pop videos for whatever, and we did that, and then that, like the YouTube algorithm somehow reached down its hand and blessed that video, and that has like 1.5 million views, and that was the thing that like then everybody went over and saw the 8 music videos that we or at least a subsection of the 8 music videos. Like that was the thing that really catapulted our YouTube presence. And it's just sort of, I'm happy that it worked, that it happened, but it just sort of broke my brain, because it's like I put all of this effort into these and then I go talk shit about pop music videos, and then boom, that's the thing that works. It's like, why?
I mean, I see this all the time. I've got so many friends that put so much into what they do and create stuff that, I mean, it's not even constructive to say it, because it's sort of like like 10 years ago, this stuff would have been amazing. Like everyone would have freaked out, this is groundbreaking stuff. And now it's almost like this, it's sort of like the TikTok sort of thing where, you're almost encouraging the stereotype narrative of people only have the attention span of 10, 15, 30 seconds, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's like when, years and years ago when, we had the, air quotes, illegal downloading of music, and then, it was too easy for people to skip songs, and streaming started to come in. And so everyone's like, well, no one's got the attention span to listen to a full album anymore. So they just kept building and building on this narrative. And so now, like, I see people that just put everything into what they do, and anything that years ago would have just broken, like, the attention of anybody out there, just totally would have brought them in, is now, like, just getting put to the side because suddenly there's this ridiculous, family dancing in a room to some shitty song because it's COVID-19 and we're all locked inside like it's a prison, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, it's weird because, you watch people just slowly dying on the inside and just going, oh, what do I do? And especially now, I mean, this is a big thing that I'm noticing, and I've noticed. I've got to watch it later because you put up a video, I think, only a few hours ago, where you were talking about improving your live streaming.
Yeah,
but, because you've got so many people that are stuck inside now, and you've also got this segment of people, a large segment of people that rely on entertaining and performing and getting out there, and they're all jumping over now into live streaming. The amount of noise out there is insane. It's just, there's so many people just trying to get your attention. You just flick through any news feed or any sort of social media feed, and it's just nonstop. So it's harder than ever. I mean, it's fun, it's exciting because there's just so many opportunities out there. But at the same time, you look at it and go, man, like how do I do something that's going to cut through the noise, but not kill myself in the process trying to do it?
Yeah, I mean, and I agree with you 100%. And that's something that it's always a tough dance, for people like you and me who, we really put a lot of time and effort and love into the music and the videos and all that sort of stuff that we make. And it, in the grand scheme of things, it is a blip on the radar of all of the sea of content out there. And so I think something that has been kind of hard for a lot of us, for me especially, but I know a lot of people is learning to sort of let go and to thrive in the, to sort of build towards that environment of, okay, I've got a short attention span theater here, maybe I do actually need clickbaity titles and horrible thumbnails. Maybe I do actually, need to, invest some time into figuring out 30-second videos for Instagram, to push people towards like the full album. I mean, it's all that. There's a lot of stuff going on right now, just in terms of, like you said, in terms of people live streaming, in terms of people trying to push this feed, that feed, and a lot of the live streams are just bad. I mean, they're just really horrible, and that was part of the thing that my video today was trying to help address. I came out with for those listening who haven't seen it yet. So youtube.com/Swords of the Trident. I run it used to be monthly. I ran a monthly like DIY advice video thing called Words of Fang, where I would kind of break down a topic in a very small to medium band sized fashion sort of approach, right? And the one I did this month, so now that we're all locked inside and I have absolutely nothing else to do and I can't see any of my guys, I've been doing them weekly because I've been going crazy sitting on my hands doing nothing and playing video games. So the one that I just released was it was about using the tools that you already have, stuff from your home studio, small recording interfaces, free amp sims, that kind of stuff, to make your live stream actually sound halfway decent. Because I've seen so many people that are just like sitting in front of their MacBook with an acoustic guitar just singing, and I'm like, wow, this I mean, it sounds okay, but it doesn't sound great, and it doesn't really recreate that experience of like being at a show, or being able to hear things clearly. One of the bands that really inspired me in terms of, the live streaming and stuff like that, and we kind of came into this at the same time, but one of the bands that inspired me making this video was Psycho Stick. I don't know if you're familiar with those guys. They're hilarious. They're a comedy metal band. They've been around for a million years. They were pre-YouTube. They came out with this song called "Beer Is Good."
All right, I'm won over.
Yeah. It is, and they have a huge fan base. We've toured with them quite a bit, and they have a absolutely gigantic. They're hilarious, and they have a huge fan base. But like me and like you, we're getting older here, and we're not getting any younger. And for like a 21, 22-year-old, being on the road for 4 or 5 weeks at a time, that might sound like fun, but for us old guys here, I mean, it's kind of draining, and it kind of takes away from the day job and all that sort of stuff, if you can even do it. They've moved into a lot of they've been moving into doing a lot of like full concert streaming from their practice studio, and they have multiple cameras. They have everything professionally mixed, and they make they do it now. They do a show like every Thursday, and every single show, I kid you not, they have been making something along the lines of like $4,000 to $5,000.
Wow.
Just in donations. And of course they're giving half of that to like the WHO's COVID-19 fund. But they're making crazy bank on this, just doing these live shows. So it's, it's definitely, if you do the live shows right, if you promote them right, if you treat them, with the same care that you would treat a real live show, I mean, you can really continue to build a fan base and continue to make money during this weird time. All of our live shows or live streams, we do a live podcast. We've been making pretty decent money on those things, just from YouTube super chats and donations and all that sort of stuff. The thing I'm doing tomorrow, the quarantine karaoke, if this is probably going up a little later, so people can watch the replay on the YouTube channel. But the whole gist of that is, we're raising money for COVID-19. Kind of stole that whole idea from Psychosick, but people will come in and pledge. I have a whole list of songs, that you can make me sing. Some, are more kind of in my style, and some are, like the Spice Girls. Some are more dumb. And I have it, priced out based on kind of how difficult or how dumb the song is. So you can pledge using Super Chats what you want me to sing, and I will basically sing whatever you want. You can also pledge in the chat to either have me take a drink or do a shot. So as the night goes on, and this thing's probably going to run for 2-3 hours, because I have a lot of songs planned. So as the night goes on, it's going to get shittier and shittier and funnier. So
I love it. I reckon that's so good. I mean, the good thing, because we've sort of known each other at least from a distance, and luckily we've met as well. But yeah, it's only been a few years. But in that time, I've just watched from afar what you guys collectively have been doing, and it's almost like, it sounds weird to say, but you've almost sort of set yourselves up to absolutely maximize a period like this, where you already had the tools. You guys were already thinking along these lines, whether it came from inspiration from another band. You guys have already started to have that sort of work ethic and that method sort of in place as far as interacting with people online, doing all these different mediums, not just worrying about a live stream of a performance or anything like that, but also doing podcasts, also doing interactive stuff with your audience, your crowd. And I've been watching your Patreon stuff, and the amount of stuff that you guys create and put in there is just incredible. So coming into like a period like this where you can see other people have never done this before, and as you said, like, get the MacBook out with the acoustic guitar and desperately trying to win over your affection because they can't get on a stage anymore.
Right.
You guys are there and pretty much equipped to keep charging forward to a degree, and so it's pretty exciting. It's cool to watch it all happen.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the Patreon, because like the Patreon was really a lot of the driver for all of this. It doesn't hurt that a bunch of us are, well, all of us are, nerds at heart, and or just plain old nerds, and we love technology, and and we are kind of on the internet 24/7, so we have that idea or that pulse of like, what's going on, what do people enjoy doing, in terms of like how are they consuming their media, and more to the point of I run into a lot of bands that, and I'm sure you do too, that have this idea of like, okay, we're going to make this CD and we're going to put it out, and then then a manager's going to find us, and then we're going to be touring it, and we're going to make a living off of our CD sales, and selling records. And it's like, yeah, dude, no. So especially nowadays with this generation and just the area that we're in. So we moved over to this whole, we moved over to crowdfunding early. We started up a Kickstarter, I think maybe 8 months to a year after Kickstarter had actually founded itself. It had started. We did our first one, and I was very, 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 very pessimistic about crowdfunding when we started. And it was funny. Here's a quick funny story of our first Kickstarter. I brought up the idea to the guys, and the guys were also very pessimistic, because I guess from our perspective, and maybe from a lot of musicians' perspectives, you say to yourself, well, who the heck is going to want to give us money? Like, at all, yeah, we make money at shows a little bit, but like, who's going to open their wallet and type in their credit card number and give us like $50 for a CD and a T-shirt and a signed poster and blah 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 blah, when we're just some dudes living in the basement, So we had that sort of mindset starting up our first Kickstarter, and it was still a new thing at the time, right? So that worked. In terms of mental state, that worked against us, where we're like, well, nobody's going to want to do this, but it was also new and fresh and like exciting. So, that worked towards our goal in the long run. So anyway, we had an EP coming out, and we're like, well, let's try this Kickstarter thing. And we had a goal, our total costs, we weren't doing a whole lot with it. It was a very small EP. Our total costs were going to be around $1,500 US. And so I told the guys, I'm like, okay, look, let's just do it for like $700, right? And then we'll see how it goes. We'll run a 30-day campaign. We might have to throw in a few dollars, at the end to like make it to our goal, but like, we'll give it a shot and we'll see what happens. So I said to them, I'm reasonably sure we're going to make $700 if we each throw in, maybe $50 or whatever. And then we'll do, they said we should have a stretch goal. So I'll say like, okay, our stretch goal is going to be $1,400, double the price, or double the goal. And then we'll give away our first CD to everybody who pledged over, $10 or whatever. And then they said, they also said, I went to this seminar, for doing Kickstarter stuff. And they said, they also said you should do like a funny stretch goal that will never happen, but it'll be something that people can talk about. So I said, okay, how about this? If we make $2,100, which is 3 times our, our goal, we'll do a sexy calendar. It'll be the Men of Lords of the Trident sexy calendar. And everybody laughed. We're like, yeah, $2,300, that'll never happen. Let's do it. And or $2,100. And at the end of we made our goal. We made our $700 goal in 24 hours. And so we look at this and we're like, oh crap, And I mean, it's good, but we're like, uh-oh. And then at the end of the 30-day period, we had something like $2,300. So we ended up having to do the sexy calendar, which the guys have promised that I never ever do again as a stretch goal. I had a lot of fun with it, but some of the guys maybe not so much. But so we got into crowdfunding early, and we've had a lot of success with crowdfunding. And we started up a Patreon, maybe about a year or 2, a year and a half after Patreon had kind of started becoming a thing more for musicians and less just for YouTubers. When it started up, it was kind of more on the YouTuber side of things. And we were marginally active on YouTube, but nothing like we are today. So I saw like a comedy group that I really, really enjoy called Mega 64, started up a Patreon, and their whole pitch was like, look, we're going to keep putting out stuff. You can donate to this if you want. It's completely optional. So, if you want to see us make more things faster, you can donate here, but you don't have to. And they opened it up, with almost no prizes and almost nothing. And about a week later, they had $11,000 a month coming in.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I was looking at that. I'm like, holy buckets, all right, I will think about starting up a Patreon. And then I started thinking about it. And then of course, 48 hours later, I had it all up and running, because that's just, once you have an idea, man, So we've been doing the Patreon thing for pretty solidly for 3.5 years at this point. And that, more than anything else, has been a complete and total game changer for how we do this band, how we think about this band, and what kind of content we are striving to create. Because we put a lot of content out on the Patreon, and we push a lot of people towards the Patreon pretty constantly. And for good reason. At the moment, the Patreon is our easily our number one source of income. We're making about $1,750 a month on the Patreon, which is in Australian dollars is
it's
$2,000.
About $1 million.
Yeah, in dollar dues, it's 2,725 Australian dollar dues a month. So I mean, and even when it was. So the podcast, right? I was like, we started up this Patreon. I'm like, maybe we should start doing a podcast. And the guys were like, I don't know. Who's going to want to hear us talk, for an hour about what kind of food we're eating and movies we're watching and blah, 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 And so I made it a stretch goal on the Patreon. And then boom, it became popular, and it's a driver of people towards that. And we turned it into a live show, and now we're actually making, $100 to $150 every time we do this podcast. And then, and a bunch of this other stuff was drivers, for the Patreon, because we're getting that money in, because we're trying to make more stuff for it. So we got a bunch of money saved up from the Patreon, and we bought an in-ear monitoring system, so we don't have to put up with the crappy monitors at, whatever club we're playing at, that night, and whatever level of drunk the sound engineer is, we don't have to put up with that anymore. We can just have the same mix every night. And then from that, because we got that from the Patreon money, I'm like, well, there's got to be a way that we can kind of give back to the Patreon people, to the patrons. And so, we started, grabbing a multi, we grabbed a multi-track recordings off of the earbox, because it's basically a digital mixer. And so I bring that back, I mix it. I mix not only us, but I mix all the bands we play with, all the opening bands. Send them out a fully mixed bootleg of their whole show, and we do that for our Patreon backers. We do it for every show. So we do kind of like the Pearl Jam approach of every show's got a bootleg, and you can, if you were at this show, you can download it, you can listen to other shows. All you need to do is toss in $1 a month, and that's it. And it doesn't really cost us a whole lot, because we're just, we've already paid for this thing. But it's great, because the Patreon every month, it's it's guilt money, right? You get this giant sum of money dumped in your lap, at the beginning of every month, and then you look at it, or at least I do. I look at it and I'm like, oh man, that's a lot. What? Geez, even when it was only a couple $100, it was like, oh God, what have I done for them lately? I got to do something. Oh, I gotta make something. I gotta make a video, or I gotta do something, because I just got $200. Oh man, I gotta do something, And now, and then you rinse and repeat. You make a video, and then you get more people backing your Patreon, because you're making stuff constantly, and then you get guiltier and guiltier and guiltier, as the time goes on, and then you're like, oh God, I need to make another YouTube series to keep these people happy. And in reality, right, nobody cares. A lot of the people that are we do we do every year, we do a survey of our Patreon backers. And, we have these questions of like, well, if we weren't giving out prizes, or if we weren't giving you t-shirts, or if we weren't making bootlegs or whatever, like, would you still support the Patreon? Like, to what level does the prize influence your pledge? And every year, about 75 to 78% of people on the Patreon are like, I don't care if you put out anything. I'm just supporting you because I like your band and I want to see you guys do well. So in reality, we don't really need to do all this sort of stuff. But I'm not going to sit here and delude myself that it's not helping. So all of that drive, right, towards making a podcast, towards doing the bootlegs, towards once we figured out how to do bootleg, we're like, well, could we also record a bootleg and live stream this to YouTube at the same time? Because we made so for people out there, I'm sure there's a bunch of different people who listen to your podcast. For the people out there who are not familiar with an in-ear monitoring system, you're a band, you show up to the club, you have a sound guy who's varying levels of drunk, and he will send you audio back to the stage. Well, some nights you get a really great sound guy and he does a really good job, but most nights you don't.
No, you don't.
And it's hard to hear your vocals, it's hard to hear your guitar, it's hard to hear the drums, whatever. So we have created a box that basically hijacks the mic signals and runs them to a centralized mixer that goes into our ears. So every single night we have the exact same mix. We can hear everything exactly how we want it. We don't even have to bug the sound guy to set up the things. So we created, when we did this, right, because I'm sure you've had this situation too. We've had a situation where we've showed up to a club, and actually this happened very, very recently. It happened 2 months ago. We've showed up to a club, and the sound guy is either out sick or dead or got fired yesterday and nobody told you, and it's like, do you guys know how to run sound? So they expect you to like run sound at the same time that you're playing, which is impossible. So we made a mix called the Drunk Sound Guy mix. It's just a stereo signal. It's a left and a right, and it's the band is generally mixed like reasonably okay for just about any room. So once we had that, we're like, oh, could I run this like fully mixed thing out to YouTube and like set up a webcam and do a live stream? And it turns out, yes, you can. So, like we were already set up before this whole COVID thing hit to do live streams that are fully mixed, to do podcasts that are like, making us money, to continue to get income, even when we can't go out and play, which is not something that a whole lot of bands can say. So we've been really, really lucky, really fortunate, and we are absolutely 100%, indebted to everybody who jumps on our Patreon and helps us out. Even the people at $1 a month. I mean, it's just like, that is the engine that drives the band right now.
I love this stuff because I'm going through it at the moment. Just trying to work out. Yeah, I'm going through that sort of step where you guys did it years ago at Kickstarter, sort of thinking, oh man, who's gonna throw money our way? Like, how am I sort of, what right do I have to put it out there and ask for anything? I'm basically like pleading for people just to pay attention to me, let alone throw money at me. So I've been going through a lot of that and getting closer to sort of jumping that chasm into that next realm for myself personally. But putting the money aside, I mean, no doubt just psychologically, just having, I guess, as you said, that guilt money coming in and sort of the accountability in place, even if it actually exists or not from your Patreon community. I mean, all this stuff that you're doing as a result of that, I mean, is it fair to say that a lot of it wouldn't have happened had you not had the sort of this mechanism in place where you guys are being held accountable psychologically to think of new things to do, build stuff, try and work out what's going to be something that I can put in front of our growing community each month?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, if we, I talk to a lot of, you and I both talk to a lot of bands that get stuck in this mindset that it's still 1980, that they can just put their nose to the grindstone and put out a good album, and then magically, everyone will pay attention to them. And that's just not the case anymore. You really have to diversify your offerings. You have to do video, you have to be on the internet, you have to do social media, you have to, because you never know, what's going to hit. Case in point, the whole metal musicians react to pop. You have no idea what's going to hit, and it might not be your music, but if you find something that hits and that works for you and that drives a lot of people, then you have a captive audience for them to check out your music. So the music might not be the music is the main thing ultimately, but it might not be the thing that gets the ears or the eyeballs on you. Interestingly enough, I was just playing a video game that came out in 2014 called Alan Wake, and the band Poets of the Fall did like almost a ton of the music for it.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, if you were a big fan of video games, or if you were a big fan of this specific company, this same company made like Max Payne and a bunch of very famous video games. Like if you're a fan of this kind of company or these kind of games, there's a chance that you'd have no idea who Poets of the Fall would be. But if you really loved Alan Wake, oh well, maybe I'll check out this Poets of the Fall band, and so it's that kind of like. If they had said no to like, hey, you guys want to appear in a video game and like do some some dumb little songs for it, if they would have said no, then they would have missed that opportunity. So I think it's you have to sort of diversify. You have to force yourself to be force yourself to be interested, and for the band's sake, right? In all of these different ways that you can reach audiences that maybe you don't know are out there yet. And I think too, to kind of go back to the Patreon and the whole guilt money thing too, having something other than, just you guys need to make music and put it out. Thinking about a band as more of like, and this is a term that a lot of people don't like, but as like content creators instead of just music. Music is content, but so is video, and so is it could be a blog, it could be a podcast, right? I mean, thinking about creating content that all ties into a central hub, where it's like, okay, well, people might not like my music, but maybe they're fans of Lords of the Trident for my advice columns that I do for like DIY bands. Anything that I'm talking about isn't specifically applied to metal. It could apply to country or pop or anything. So or maybe they don't like my advice columns, but they like my music video or my cooking channel, or I don't have a cooking channel, but I'm just like, who knows? You're creating all this stuff and you're putting it under that one roof, and then the people that really drive you and keep you going and keep you moving towards that are the people that are financially supporting you directly. So your patrons, right? So you get on Patreon and you get these people that are willing, that love you enough to give you $10 a month, $20 a month. Sometimes we have one guy giving us $60 a month, which is crazy, which is absolutely crazy. But he's like, you guys are my favorite band of all time. And I'm like, oh, that's a lot, man. That's a lot. I mean, I appreciate that, but you put, we have a couple people that have like tattoos of our, and I'm like, dude, don't, no, God. I mean, do you have any fans that have? Do you have any fans that have Lord tattoos?
Yeah, we've got a few, and
it's so weird.
It is weird. It's a conflicting set of emotions that flow through you when you see them, because it's like, that's so cool, like amazing. Oh, look at what we're doing. Look, we're having this impact on people. And the other side of it's like, when are they going to start regretting it? When are they start?
Yeah.
When are they going to start being disappointed in us? Or when are they going to start saying something like, now the pressure's so much, oh my God, they're going to regret, this is horrible, blah, blah, blah. And it's just, oh man, so I understand those feelings.
I broke the news to the guys that, when we had somebody who was not in the band, who had their first Lords of the Trident tattoo, I sat them down. I'm like, okay, guys, look, I'm just, there's no easy way to put this, but we can never suck. We can never, ever, ever suck. We need to be good all the time. because somebody just got a tattoo, and they're like, no, that's so cool, but no. But it's those type of people that have the tattoos and that are that put their money where their mouth is, who are giving you money on a monthly basis, who are invested as like part of your team, because that's what they basically are. They want to feel like part of your team. They're directly helping you. They're the people on the inside that have the know-how, that have the that have the lead singer's phone number, who can call them up if they really need to ask them a question about blah blah blah. Those are the people that are the most important to any band. I mean, the super fans are the main source of growth, because I mean, like, same thing with you guys, right? You get one guy who has a Lord tattoo, he's going to tell every person he sees, at any festival about how cool Lord is, and that one person alone is gonna get you, 100 more fans. So I mean, I really take Patreon as sort of like the sounding board and sort of the depository of like, here's where all of our number one fans live. And if I put something out on Patreon that people love and the general internet just couldn't give a crap about, then I know, okay, I'm going in the right direction, because I want more people that love this stuff enough that they're gonna like give me $10 a month to keep doing it. And I could care less if the general internet hates it, because in that wide general internet, you're gonna find one or two or three or four guys that will be the next super fans that are introduce 100 more people to your band. So yeah, I mean, Patreon and the guilt money, but also that sense of community and that sense of people being invested in your project, that's the thing that really sort of gets my creative juices flowing of like, okay, what else can I make for these people? Because it's like they're not only giving me money, but they're cheering us on constantly. I mean, that one guy's like, you're my favorite band of all time. It's like, oh, geez, okay, well, I better make something cool now. Holy cow,
I better suddenly get better. Like, even though he thinks we're already the best band in the world, we've still got to get better.
That is exactly, and this ties all the way back to the beginning of the podcast. That is exactly why you see me doing opera right now. I've actually been studying opera under a doctor of voice for about a year and a half now, and so we did a live stream event right at the beginning of this whole lockdown thing, where it was called Fang Sings the Classics, and so yeah, what I did is I basically did a recital of the 7 or 8 different opera arias that I had been working on over the past year and a half. And that was our most watched like live stream thing ever. Ever. It was crazy. And it was just me singing classical music. It was nuts. So yeah, and the reason I'm doing it, is just because you get to a point, and of course you guys have been there. You get to a point where you're not really, playing and touring with like the with like the Pee Wee League anymore. There's not a really easy way to say it, but it's like you're not playing with like you're not routinely playing with like the guys down the street that have a band in their garage and maybe they practice this week. I mean, you start to tour with the people who, if they're not doing it for a living, they're pretty close, or the people who have been, who take their art and their live performances incredibly seriously, and they're established bands, and then you start to get into, you might be the best band amongst the lower level, for lack of a better term, right? The sort of lower tier bands. You might be the best band amongst that band, but then you start touring with, bigger bands who have been around for a while and take the craft seriously. And then all of a sudden you start to feel like, well, maybe I'm not as good of a singer as I could be. Maybe I should take this a little bit more seriously. Maybe I should branch out a bit and kind of improve my skills, and that kind of stuff. I mean, playing with playing with Unleash the Archers and just, hanging out with Brittany and generally talking opera. I was an opera fan kind of before I started studying it, but made me go like, oh yeah, I should really kind of up my game a little bit if I want to actually, do like a full-on tour with these guys, because they'll just wipe the floor with us every single night. So,
and that's what makes it interesting from a fan perspective, like a supporter, someone who can see, because no doubt when you're sharing, this content with people, you're especially within your inner community, you're sharing a bit of this narrative as well with people. So people are watching your own journey, what you're doing, and no doubt seeing progress over time as well. So it's kind of exciting because, as you said before, like they're directly contributing to the machine that you guys collectively are creating, and inside that machine there's so many different things that are going on which make it interesting, and it's multifaceted, and it's exciting. And so suddenly people are going, wow, I'm not just supporting in the way of acknowledging your existence and giving you a bit of social media love and things like that, but I'm actually directly financially contributing towards you guys just getting better as a band collectively and individuals. So it's I think it also takes away that sort of pressure of, when you start out in a band, you expect that you're going to, well, the goal is to win over the masses. And I think once you get past that and you realize now that the way that we're connected to each other is that you only need a really small circle of people. I mean, we always want that circle to be bigger, but you only need a very small circle of people that they're absolutely diehards about what you do. And that's more than enough to keep your band pumping and continuing to do what you do and what you love. And as soon as you've got that inner circle of people, then you can go from there.
Absolutely. There's so many bands that I that I find out about, and I'm sure everybody has the same experience. You find out about a band through one channel or another, and you dig into them, and then you're like, oh my God, these guys have been around for 10 years. Like, wait, how did I not, like, I love this. Like, how did I not know about this sooner? And the realization that comes from that is like, there are thousands of bands that are just like that are not household names. I think honestly, if the 2000s and 2010s and going forward, for the music industry, if anything is sort of like the footnote or the general title, right, of this era, it's sort of the death of the realization, or the death of like giant bands, at least in rock and metal.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there's not really a new, you can't really point to too many bands and go like, yeah, they're going to be the next Metallica, or yeah, these guys are like clearly the next Iron Maiden or Judas Priest. Like they're on their way, they're coming up, they're going to be there. It's like, no, there's not a whole lot of that. But what there is a lot of, and what makes me, hopeful for the future, and for the future of our band, and for the future of a lot of like the mid-tier bands, is there's a lot of mid-tier bands that are doing really well, that have that circle of that small but very, very focused circle of influence, where they have a whole bunch of real diehard fans. Say they've got, if they've got 1,000 super fans, I mean, they're basically full time, and that doesn't seem like that daunting of a number when you start to think about it. There's a point, right, where, and we're getting close-ish to it, where if everybody, if we had maybe, I don't know, if we had maybe about 50 to 100 more people pledging on the higher levels of our Patreon, right? If that point happened, the 50 to 100 more people, at least two of us could probably quit our jobs and just do the band full time.
Wow.
Like that's, and when you say that, when you look at that number, I mean, right now we have 225 people pledging towards our Patreon. That's not, we're not talking stadiums. We're not talking, I mean, and we could be making a living doing music. And I think that's ultimately, right, whether everybody's dream is superstardom or not, I think everybody's base dream is just like, I want to do this creative stuff. I want to do this music stuff like full time. I want this to be my job. I want to sustain myself and to be able to eat and have a roof over myself just by, you know, putting out this stuff that I love and I'm passionate about. And when you break it down in those numbers where you're like, well, I really only need like, I don't know, 350-ish super fans to toss us maybe $10 a month. Which, you know, in the grand scheme of things, $10 a month that's not a whole lot, but that is, you know, you get 300 people to do that, and then you can quit your job, you know, and so that is the thing that it's like, wow, there's a lot of bands that are doing well that have those 300 people already. Maybe they have more, you know, that the general masses will never hear about. You know, they'll never be. At least I don't foresee, unless something drastically shifts, there's not going to be another, you know, super big, crazy household name that literally everybody and their grandma has heard about, like Metallica, you know, or maybe like Foo Fighters or whatever. But there's definitely the possibility of having mid-level and upper mid-level bands, you know, be full-time musicians and make a living. And I think it's just all in the approach. It's how you perceive that goal and how you work towards it.
I think also just having the confidence to take that step and sort of put yourself out there, because in the end, I mean, the market decides whether, you know, they're going to throw any money your way or not in a large sense. But, you know, I mean, I think, as we said earlier, like, I think people sort of get stuck in the old romantic vibe of what the 80s was like, or what, you know, the stereotypical sort of, you know, the way to make it is to get the record label, and that's how they're going to fund what you do, and they're basically the gatekeepers to any form of success. And now it's a case of, well, you've really got to be a little bit vulnerable and put yourself out there in a positive way, and just say, hey, like, this is what we're doing, and I'm going to give you opportunities that if you want to, you can throw money our way. It's not a case of, well, we're going to put everything behind a paywall, and basically, if you want it, you got to pay for it. It's a case of, well, I'm just going to make sure that I don't have to continue to ask in a way, but I'm just going to make sure there's enough little avenues here that if you feel that it's something that you want to do, you can certainly do so. And I think a lot of bands and just people individually just really struggle with this. So I think once you get past that first little step, and I mean for you guys, just from what you've explained, going through that first sort of experience with Kickstarter and just understanding that dynamic between you guys as a band doing something that you love, putting everything that you have into it, and then suddenly getting a community around you that go, hey, you guys are actually doing stuff that we enjoy, and here's some money to help you continue to do what you do.
Yeah,
it's almost like that's the spark behind it all, and suddenly it's like, oh wow, now I can build this confidence and continue to put ourselves out there and just build what we're already doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I don't want to delude anybody listening that, you know, you can just make a Patreon and, you know, hit go, and then all of a sudden your dreams will come true. I mean, it still is, right? It's what I've been saying before. It still is a multifaceted approach. You still have to, you know, you still have to go out and make the fans. You still have to, you know, play shows for the most part. A lot of people still have to make shows, or you still have to, like, just make stuff. But yeah, I think allowing people to give you money rather than saying, like, you got to give me $13.99 for the CD, man, or else you can't hear any of it. You know, it's like, no, just give it away for free, and if they want to give you money, they will. That's the thing. A lot of people, everybody who pledges to, you know, Patreon to a creator, ultimately does so because they believe in them, and I think also, you know, you get a kick out of it. I mean, like, what if this band that you're pledging towards, that you are in the inner circle of, that you're a super fan of, you know, like, legitimately you're a super fan because you're giving them money and they're talking to you directly. What if this person, what if they blow up? What if they are the next Iron Maiden? And you know, and then 20 years down the line, you know, you still have Bruce Dickinson's phone number and you can call him up and go get beers. I mean, like, who doesn't want that? You know, and I think that's the drive for a lot of the people, and a lot of supporting that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think the idea of like, you know, of putting stuff behind a paywall and paywall only is kind of dead. I think the better thing is like allow people to give you what they can spare, and then allow people to be generous if they want to. I have two interesting sort of anecdotes from that. There's there was a time, this is 5, 6, 7 years ago, where I was being I had a chance to work with Martin Atkins, who was the drummer of Nine Inch Nails and Pigface and Killing Joke, and he is a crazy giant, like white-haired British guy, just hilarious, and he's sort of like the king of DIY, and I feel like I'm always sort of doing a bad Martin Atkins impression, when I do my DIY stuff. But I sat down with him, and I went through sort of our business plan of the band, going like, okay, well, where do you think we can improve? And he's like, so Ty, what are you selling? How much are you selling your CDs for? And I'm like, $10. He's like, well, why are you doing that? I'm like, I don't know, because that's what CDs cost. Is it? Do you think this CD costs $10? I'm like, I think maybe. He's like, why don't you just ask the people what they want to spend for it? And I'm like, what do you mean? And so we changed. I thought about that, and we changed all of our payment, like for CDs, right, at our merch booth, to a pay what you want model. And like, nobody gives us $10 anymore. Everybody just throws down a 20 and leaves. I mean, like, seriously, it's crazy. People will give you money if you allow them to. I think that's something that, a lot of people need to learn, and we ourselves included. I didn't really think that people would want to pay $20 for a CD, but then you get a few beers in them and they see the show and they're like, these guys rule, and they'll come up to your merch booth. They're like, here's a 20, man. You earned it. You were great tonight. Just give me whatever CD you like. I mean, that has happened to us so many times. And so many bands are guarded. They're like, well, we can't, if we do like a pay what you want, or if we just ask people for money, and let them do whatever they want, then they'll just give us like 5 cents and they'll leave, they'll take all of our stuff. It's like, no, that never happens. I think I can count in the last 8 years, 7, 8 years. I can't remember how long we've been doing this. It's been so long. But I can count, there's 2 times that somebody has given us like $1 and taken a CD. And it's like, you know what? If the amount of times that people have given us $20, $30, $40 and taken one CD completely, makes up for that. B, if the guy literally only had $1, but he wants to take my music home, like, I think it's more important that he has my music and listens to it. And maybe down the road, he has more money and he wants to become a fan on Patreon. I don't know,
I think we've got to have we've got to have a bit more faith in people. I think I'm the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like this natural reaction that you have to these outside of the box, outside of the comfort zone scenarios or ideas, and you sort of think, like, straight away, yeah, like if you allow people to pay what they want, then you automatically just go to the worst case scenario, and you just think, well, what if everyone comes and just pays $1 a CD instead of what we're normally charging? But
right.
I think we've definitely got to have more faith in people, because most people are actually reasonable and are good people. Most people are pretty cool, and so I think it's very hard. I think you'd have to, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, or it's a bad person who spends the $1 for the CD. They might, for whatever reason, they're doing that. But, in the end, I think most people will come over and look at this situation, have enough awareness to sort of think, well, all right, this is where I'm going to demonstrate my value, or
right.
what I can provide,
right.
But that's a big thing for any band to do. So, and for you guys to be doing it for so many years as well. I mean, as you said, the amount of times where you're really getting virtually nothing for a CD versus the people that are spending 3-4 times as much as you'd normally charge. It doesn't just balance it out. It completely like tips the scales.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's just absolutely nuts. And I think too, like the fear, that you're talking about of this change, you might have a bad outcome. You might try something and it might not work for you. But I think that the fear shouldn't stop people from attempting it. I think generally a lot of people look at all the stuff that I do, and they go like, man, I could never do that. Like, I could never figure that out. Like, man, you must be some like, certified Mensa genius kind of. No, dude, I'm super dumb. Like, come on, like, there's YouTube tutorials on how to do anything, and I think that a lot of the fear of what could go wrong, right, stops people from attempting and learning and growing. Generally, just growing, right? As people, as bands, as businesses, just because they're afraid that if they buck the quote unquote model that's been put in front of them, that all of their hopes and dreams will crash and burn. And I think Adam Savage of the Mythbusters, he said. He said failure is always an option. That's one of his main quotes, And the cool thing about failure is that, if you fail, I mean, like you might fail. It might be, I don't know, semi-catastrophic. The only catastrophic failure is death, really. So if you don't die, I mean, you will have learned so much from that experience that it would be worth it to try it and just to see what happens. So I think a lot of people just need to kind of have somebody kick them in the butt and go like, just go try to put a buzzsaw on the front of a CGI, spaceship and just see what happens, man. Like, you never know. Funny side note too, that kind of relates to all of this. You had said earlier, that people still think that, you need to be signed, and have record labels sort of intervene to sort of be successful. And, there, and I won't say that record labels are completely useless, because there a lot of them have connections. A lot, their use, I think nowadays, their use is PR, purely PR, and the connections that you have for being a quote unquote signed artist on X, Y, or Z. So because of the fact, I'll tell you this story because of the fact that you're familiar with like basically how much I do. It was, and the record label shall remain nameless, but it is a record label that has very recently sort of signed some people that are friends of ours and higher profile stuff, and so I think anybody who knows a lot about Lords of the Trident would probably be able to infer who I'm talking about. But there was this record label who wanted to sign us and was very interested in signing us. Came out, sent an A&R guy out. We went and we had drinks and we talked and we had this whole discussion about contracts and blah blah blah. And we went through all of the business points. X, Y, Z, the whole thing. And we talked it over, and we're like, okay, I think let's give it a shot. It's a 3-album deal. We'll just we'll figure it out and see how it works. If it doesn't work, then we'll break ties with them after 3 albums are done, and then we'll just go our separate ways. And a week later, I hadn't heard from him, and I was emailing the A&R guy, and like, oh yeah, I did talk to the owner and blah blah blah. So he ended up talking to the owner. And there are apparently 2 owners of the record label. One of the owners was like, "Yeah, get him, yeah, get him," and the other guy was like looking at us, and he said this, and I'm sure this is the one phrase that broke my brain for a week. I'm still pissed about this. I'm still angry about this one phrase that was relayed to me over email from the owner of this record company. He said, "Yeah, I'm not so sure. We'd like to see you doing a little more." And bear in mind that this was 1 month before we were about to go over for our first European tour that I had fully set up and booked myself. And, and we had like we were just about to go tour Europe, and he's like, "I'd like to see you do more."
It's like, what more do you want from me?
Yeah, I'm like, how much more what do you need? What do you want? So you probably
found yourself going through like his current roster and just sizing yourself up against the other bands, going, well, hang on, we're doing more than that band, we're doing more than that band.
The interesting thing was, right, is that the A&R guy who met with us was very familiar with us, and he'd been following us for years, and he pitched Lords of the Trident to them as like, you say that you want to find bands that work harder than we do, that are more interested and more invested than we are. This is the textbook band. Like, look at all they're doing, and that was the funny thing, because that was exactly what I did. I went through the roster and I'm like, you sons of bitches. Like, this band's doing nothing. This band has no YouTube whatsoever. This guy's like, what this band hasn't come out with a CD in 3.5 years. This, it's like, and I was like, oh man, yeah, that broke me. 100% broke. So needless to say, we did not sign with them. They did not come back with an offer. It was just, it was nuts. It was absolutely nuts.
But I guess
so.
I was just gonna say.
I was gonna say. Long story short, kids listening, you don't need a record label to tell you incorrect things to make you famous.
Well, I think the big thing as well is, I'm sure you guys have been through it, especially in the early stages of putting a band together, is that when you think of that as an option, as a big thing that you need to sort of run towards as far as getting signed and getting albums released through a label, etc. Once you start to create your own little empire, the pressure of that sort of starts to reduce, and so, you might get this opportunity where you're sitting down and having a chat to an A&R person, and you're looking at it going, hey, like, this could be really good and let's give it a go. But then ultimately, when it boils down to it, it's not do or die, because you've already created something that is sustainable. It's feeding itself. You guys all know what you're doing, and it's not like, well, this is our one shot, one shot at glory, and if we don't get this, then we're going to give up. We're going to throw the towel. And it's like, it's frustrating, and obviously the way that they've come back to as well is probably the worst part of the whole thing. But but I mean, in the end, it's sort of like, okay, well, they said, ultimately they've said no, and you sort of step back and you go, oh well, look, we keep going, we keep doing our thing, and it's no big negative impact on our operation, what we've created. Right.
Yeah, that was the greatest thing, that when we were sitting down as a band discussing, this whole thing, the whole, exactly what you said, the whole thing boiled down to, do we need this? We could say yes to it, we could say no to it, and either way we will be fine. Like, either way, if we decide to take it, we'll be fine. If we decide not to take it, we'll be fine. I don't know. I mean, I know a few other bands that have had the success in terms of like monthly income and generating that sort of like drive, that driver for an income source. There are a couple of bands on Patreon who have a decent amount of income, but all of them have been signed in the past and had that PR. We're as far as I can tell, we are the number one most funded band in terms of dollar amount on Patreon of a metal band that's never been signed.
Wow.
So we came into that situation where we said, like, we don't need these guys. It would be really nice to have these guys. And then they said, the guys were saying, like, so Ty, what is the pros of signing, with this label that that you're interested in? And I said, Patreon backers. All I wanted them for, and I think when it boils down to it nowadays, like I was saying earlier, all a band wants a record label for is the PR and that stamp of that weird ethereal stamp of approval, that, all of a sudden, once you are quote unquote signed by, I mean, let's say like AFM, it wasn't AFM, but let's just say AFM. You get signed by AFM or you get signed by Nuclear Blast, right? And then all of a sudden you have that ethereal stamp of like you were signed, and then, concert promoters start to go like, maybe I will call them up and have, and nothing has changed for the band. Your songs didn't get better. You didn't suddenly become more amazing musicians. You could have asked them from your Gmail account 2 months ago if you could play their fest, and they'd be like, who the heck is this band? And then all of a sudden you have this weird ethereal stamp of like, a Nuclear Blast signed Lords of the Trident, and then they're like, oh, we need to get Lords of the Trident on this, kind of a thing. So I think that's the only thing that I was interested in is like, okay, I want that PR, and I want to reach the people that only seem to follow like the YouTube channels of like the labels, just so I can find 100 more super fans to flesh out our Patreon so we can do this full time. You know?
But I mean, it's probably a really healthy way of looking at it in a way, because you understand, I guess, the limitations of what a label can offer as well. And really, I mean, the way that I see labels these days, and they still got some value in certain pockets, and especially, I mean, look, if you're their main, you know, love child in the label's roster, then you don't have to worry about anything. That you've got the backing of a fantastic label, and they're going to bend over backwards to keep your band healthy. But if you're signing and you're at the bottom tier of their roster of artists, then it's almost worse than not being signed at all, because you're restricted by their rules and their you know, whatever contract they've put in place with you. And they also don't give a shit about you, and they don't do anything for you. And so you're sitting there in this purgatory of this limbo where you go, I literally can't even do anything to take care of myself. But the way I look at labels now, in some ways, and really, I mean, this is where you sort of have to be very careful, but I just see it as it's another attention platform. Basically, there's somebody out there that's got a stage that's a little bit higher off the ground. There's a few more people standing in front of that stage, and they'll welcome you onto that stage, and they'll say your name, and everyone gets to see you, and you get to wave and say hello, and a few more people out of a purely a ratio point of view, will like you, and will talk to you afterwards and stay connected with you, and then you part ways, and that's it. And so for me now, it's like basically whoever commands the attention, whoever commands the audience, and it's not necessarily a label anymore. So you could be a quote unquote label, but really, I mean, it's just a case of, do you have a large audience that commands value, and that's pretty much all it boils down to now.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. You know, I think too that we had a very something that was very sobering to me about just labels in general is, so our guitarist was signed to Century Media years ago with his band Luna Mortis, and they they dropped him like a sack of potatoes, you know, after a year, 2 years or whatever, just because like it wasn't making. They had just put out this record, and it was like 3 months into the record, and they got dropped, and you know, something weird happened to the label in terms of management turnover or whatever. But anyway, the whole idea that, like, you know, like you said, if you're not top dog on their label, or if you're not making the money, if they're not actively interested in you, you know, they can basically tell you to go take a hike at any moment. You know, kind of takes a little bit of the whole. Takes a little bit of the whole like glamour out of this, out of, you know, being signed to a label. And yeah, so I think you're 100% right with the way that you think about, you know, an attention platform. And I would say, you know, that's the same thing with, you know, stuff like YouTube and Spotify algorithms and things like that. I think a lot of us are just trying to find a quote unquote attention platform that works. And for a lot of bands, you know, a lot of bands tend to put their eggs all in one basket, you know, of their, I'm going to be a TikTok star, or, I'm going to get signed to a label and tour the globe, or I'm going to, you know, be number one on the Spotify rap algorithms and, you know, sign a deal and get famous or whatever. And it's like, you know, nowadays, especially, you really have to do everything. You have to try all of the approaches. You have to find the ones that work for you, and you have to, you know, continue to move forward, to grow, and to not stay stagnant in a mentality of like, okay, this one thing is working for us for right now, so it's going to work for us for the rest of our lives. You know,
just got to keep
moving. Because I mean, you know, Facebook could die tomorrow. YouTube could burn to the ground. I mean, the way this whole quarantine is going, I mean, you know, we could never be playing live music ever again. And so it's like, well, if you built your entire empire on only touring and only doing live shows, dude, you know, oh man.
Yeah. Well, I think it's. I mean, I've always been excited about this kind of stuff because you suddenly find yourself doing things that you've never done before. You know, I mean, even just before sort of transitioning into doing podcasting years back, it was sort of a case of Man, like I was just always a musician, and then suddenly it's like I like the idea of doing a podcast, and then suddenly, well, it's been years later now, but it's you suddenly create another aspect of your identity that you can lean on at any given point in time, and so
absolutely.
And now I sort of look at it and go, well, what else can I do now? Like what other things can I just add to the repertoire of whatever I've been doing so far?
Yeah, I did a Words of Fang with another YouTuber who's kind of also in the DIY field named John McLucas, and the whole topic of it is like, what is the point of being a musician anymore? And because there's a lot of doom and gloom about, nobody's making any money and it's hard to see blah blah blah, and coming from like a perspective of a band that wants to go the traditional route, it's very, very difficult. But what's the point of being a musician? I mean, the point of being a musician is exactly what you said. Like if you have that mindset of like, I'm going to diversify my skill set so that my band can grow. I'm going to start making videos. I'm going to start making a podcast. I'm going to learn how to weld and make, sculptures to sell at our merch booth. I mean, like, whatever it is, you diversify your skill set so much that you start to become an expert in these things. And then people start to pay you money to do them. Like I said earlier when we were talking, it's like, people have come to me and been like, hey, can you record my album? You recorded yours. Can you record mine? And it's like, no. But, if I needed that money, if I suddenly lost my job and I needed to become a recording engineer, it's like I have the years of experience where I could, start to do that. If I lost my job and I needed to suddenly start making videos for a living, corporate videos, music videos, whatever. It's like, I've got all the equipment. I've got all the know-how. I've been doing this for years. There's no way in hell that I would have learned business tax law if I wasn't in a band. There's no way, I learned how to print my own t-shirts because that was the cheaper way to do it. And I didn't know if this one t-shirt would sell or not, so I wanted to make a batch of 10 to see if they would work or if people would love them or not. So I know how to do that. You learn all of these amazing skills from being forced to, being put in this position where you're forced to learn. And I think that's the big takeaway, the big joy of this whole journey that a lot of us, especially who are DIY focused, are discovering. Is that you're growing as a person. You might be putting a buzzsaw on the front of a spaceship in CGI because you think it would be cool for your band. But 5 years down the line, somebody might pay you $1,000 to make them a CGI logo or something like that. I mean, you never know. So it's so cool. It's like it's just a cool way to grow as a human.
I think there's heaps of people at the moment that'll be learning new skills, and I think coming out the other end, whenever the other side of this corona situation subsides, I think there's going to be a lot of people coming out with another skill set or multiple skill sets, and be taking on whatever they've been doing beforehand in a completely different way. So it's
right.
It's exciting. I think it's really cool. I'm always trying to find opportunity in anything, and even if it means being stuck at home and going a little bit stir crazy, a bit of cabin fever, you try and find, well, what are the advantages to the situation that we're in. So it's cool, and it's the perfect excuse to be doing things that we should have been doing years ago.
Right, exactly.
Cool, man. Well, I'm going to let you go, but I wrote down a whole bunch of stuff here, and it just goes to show how many things you do and how much you get involved in all these different projects and things going. Because I was writing out this list of stuff, and I'm like, far out, man! Like, this guy does not stop. And so what I'll do is I'll put a bunch of stuff in the show notes so people can learn a bit more about you and your world and all the different things that you get involved with. So obviously all the social media pages, etc. But is there anywhere in particular that people should start?
So I think the main source for Lords of the Trident is just our webpage, just lordsofthetrident.com. Obviously, I would highly encourage everyone to check out the Patreon. And then from there, I would say YouTube. Those are probably our three most active platforms at the moment would be, YouTube and Patreon. We're pretty active on Facebook and Instagram. We're also on some other social media, but we're not quite as active. I think Facebook and Instagram are our main hubs for social media. But yeah, the Patreon is a great place to start. Patreon and YouTube, I would say. We got a Bandcamp. If you type Lords of the Trident into Google and we're the first 50 pages, and then it starts to get really weird. So,
well, at least you've got a few more words in your title. If you just type in Lord into Google, oh man, that's a challenge.
Yeah, dude. I'm still telling you, man. We got to do the Lords tour. Like, we got to do a Lord. We got to do Lords like over in Japan. Like that would be so hilarious because it's like, who's playing Lords? It's like, yes.
I'm just thinking of the promo videos you could do for it. I mean, it may not be completely politically correct, but man, like it'd be so good. It'd be so good.
Yeah,
man. This I still think about that every time your band pops up in a news feed somewhere, and I think of that conversation we had at Prog Power a few years ago, and it's like, yeah.
And
okay,
you could tell Mark that I still technically beat him in arm wrestling. So you can let him know that I haven't forgotten, baby. Oh yeah.
Alrighty, go and check out Fang von Rathenstein's band Lords of the Trident over at lordsofthetrident.com. They're on Patreon. Definitely go and check that out, even just for a sticky beak to see what they're up to. It's pretty cool. And all their social media handles, etc., will all be in the show notes over at andydowling.net or andysocial.net. Nice and easy. But that's it, folks. Another week of podcasting. Go and support me on Patreon if you can. A massive thank you to all the people that support, in particular my social circle tier supporters. Andrew from Perth, Mick G from Sydney, Ash from Deniliquin, Dan from Dapto, Rod from Rayleigh in North Carolina, Saul from Oxford in the UK, Patrick from Canberra, Liam from Brisbane, and Chris from Sydney. Massive help for this podcast. Covers the costs of just having a podcast chugging away, and we're working closer to that first goal where I can up the ante and do 2 guest episodes per week. So we're getting closer and closer. We're over the halfway point. So come on over, support the podcast. Support starts from only $1 a month, and there's additional tiers there where you get exclusive podcast episodes and other stuff as well. But massive thank you to everyone that supports the podcast. I have another goal, which I'm going to put out there once we get a little bit closer to goal number 1. But lots of exciting things coming soon. So thank you very much. Patreon.com/Andy Dowling is a place to go. And also check out Lords of the Trident on Patreon as well. That's it. Until next week, folks. Take care. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 blah. Ta-ta.